Hi, everyone. Welcome to Pivotal Practices. This is the sixth podcast, and we are actually going to go over some yoga stuff today, which is exciting. I'm just going to take a little bit of a break from the chakra learning, and I'll get back to that in another episode. But today, I want to touch base on certain things with yoga, and I think that a lot of times people want to try yoga or do yoga, and there's several things that stop them from actually following through. So, one of those things might be that they're intimidated to go to a yoga studio. And I guess it's understandable, but if you find the right studio and the right classes for what it is where you're starting, you'll actually be more successful than you think. So, my recommendation is like starting with a beginner's workshop. That's always one of the best ways to start. A lot of times, when you go and grab like a tape or like something off YouTube that says for beginners, I'm just going to be honest, most of the time, it's not necessarily what I would, as a yoga teacher, believe is a beginner's level, where they're actually breaking down the poses, proper alignment, and ways to stay safe. So it's better to do a workshop or to pop into just a beginner's class or like something that's very slow. And truthfully, just about anybody could come in from never having done yoga and do like a yin yoga class, which is a bunch of restorative poses that you hold for way longer. And that kind of class is not as hard when you're learning yoga. It's definitely like another way to get introduced into the practice. So the a couple podcasts ago, we went into like a bolster, and we talked about this pose called Supta Baddha Konasana pose and the benefits of the spine. But today, I want to actually go over certain postures, certain things of alignment, so that for you, if you go to a studio, you're going to practice safely. But also, if you're practicing at home and sometimes or periodically you're noticing that you're getting hurt, it means that you're not getting enough proper alignment and you're not getting coached correctly in yoga, or you're muscling through something. And I'm not trying to put down any form or platform, but I've actually, like, it was my brother-in-law was even doing yoga through this tape, through, I forget what it was called. I think it might have been, oh, it's a form of working out where they do all sorts of different things and they record it and you have a membership. And when I personally watched the people doing the yoga, they were putting their knee way past their ankle. The person coaching it was coaching it more like a gym class. It wasn't at all like the proper form of yoga where people could end up hurt. So typically, you want to study yoga with somebody who's not just certified below 200-hour levels, but also with a program that's actually accredited by what we call Yoga Alliance. Yoga Alliance is the entity that really makes sure that a yoga program is thorough and the teachers are learning proper anatomy. You want a teacher who has experience and someone who has like a background and also continuing education over the years so that they're able to continue to help you grow. So, how long? Geez, I've been practicing yoga for 20 years now. Yeah, for over 20 years. And so, have studied with a ton of national teachers. I studied a kind of yoga that the one that I really utilize the most in my practice, it's called Anusara. And that type of yoga is still around. Um, it was actually, the anatomy and physiology was actually created by Doug Keller. And he is just this amazing anatomy and physiology teacher when it came to yoga. And then he kind of broke away from that style of yoga and then just went more independently on his own. But if you ever get a chance to study with him, it would be very beneficial. I've also studied with Sienna Sherman. I've studied with, let's see here, Todd Norian, Anne Green, Holly Clark. I've studied with, let me think. There's been so many teachers. Chad Stos. I've studied with Desiree Rumba. There's a couple more. There's been like a lot over the years. So I traveled to other states and studied and did like immersions and all these different things, and then have continued education since I've been a teacher in many different ways. So With me, you're getting that whole background and then also a couple decades of experience. So hopefully that helps you as we start to go over a couple things. So some of the things I want to go over is outside of the very thick bolster, which I said you definitely want to get. And sometimes I will utilize bringing a bolster in and bringing more of the yoga practice and how we can use the bolster in a lot of cool ways. The other thing is a yoga strap. So sometimes you can get a yoga strap that doesn't have any kind of metal attachment on the end, and other times you'll find it with the metal attachment. There are things and postures where we use the yoga strap with the metal attachment to help loop the belt to do, the strap to do different things. So to get one with the actual loops is helpful, but you don't have to. So a lot of the times yoga straps are used if somebody can't reach in a forward fold or they can't do a certain posture and they're not flexible enough or able to actually touch their toes. The yoga strap's going to help you be able to get the same benefits, but at the same time, then you're not going to hurt yourself because you're trying to actually stretch too far before your body has learned to open up over time and feel ready for that. Also, as we get older, our flexibility starts to actually diminish. So it's important, it's always important to stretch, but once we start getting like middle-aged and past middle-aged, stretching is imperative because we will lose all of our flexibility quicker over time. And I think a lot of people think that when they work out, well, I lift weights, so then I'm healthy. And I'm just going to be really honest. Hopefully this doesn't disappoint you, but being healthy, it actually takes a lot of things. Being healthy means that you do aerobic exercises. That's for your heart and lungs. It means that you lift weights because that's also for muscular strength. And once we hit 40 and past, we need to lift weights to burn fat, right? It's much harder to burn fat. And then when we're actually thinking about stretching is also the other ability to be fit and strong. Stretching helps our blood and lymph. Stretching helps our tissue empty out and detoxify. Stretching keeps our joints being able to have their full movement, right? So all of those things mean that you're healthy. It's not just doing one thing over the other. Otherwise, you're going to find an issue, right? So the strap, just to give you an example, normally for somebody, let's say like me, I've been doing yoga for a really long time. It's easier for me to touch my foot and to stretch my hamstring. So this ability for me to be able to touch here and not compromise my spine, because compromising the spine is when you see people starting to do this and people will start to round their spine to reach further. And that's actually then what? Causing misalignment. That's crushing organs. That's counterproductive to your stretching or your yoga practice. When we're properly stretching, to be able to reach my foot, I need to actually be able to lift up through my chest, hold my core in and up, and then lead with my chest. Notice I'm not rounding the spine and I'm able to touch my toes and my foot. Now, for me to be able to do it properly, if that is hard, because I don't want to strain a muscle or pull a tendon, I can take the strap and put it right into my toe mounds. I always say you never want to put the strap in the arch of the foot because the arch of the foot makes a person be able to cheat. They're able to sickle their foot into one direction or the other, and then we're causing the femur bone to not sit properly. Then we're not getting the exact therapeutic effect of the posture. So when I'm utilizing the strap to the foot, I want to do it to the toe mounds, okay? Notice when I'm grabbing the strap, if I'm grabbing the strap in a posture, I'm doing it one on each side. I have my full arm's length, so that it's not stressing my biceps. I'm not pulling at the bicep with an elbow bend. And then I'm wearing out my arms, right? And I'm overutilizing energy I don't need to use. So instead, maybe I just use the strap and I just lead with my heart. Maybe I stop right here because this is the same effect for somebody who's not as flexible as me, who's maybe a little bit less flexible. And I get the same feeling from doing this, right? Because I've been doing yoga for so long, and eventually you can be able to bow all the way down. So you you know that you're getting better in a posture, you know that you're getting healthier in a posture by the fact that you can hold it longer, the fact that you can go a little further as your body and your tissue rehabs because you're stretching it, right? I know a man who was starting to lose the height, right, as he was getting older, and he was upset about it. And so he started doing yoga. And it was like a full year later, he had gained almost all of his height back. So, it's natural because of, the earth and all of the gravity that it does to the body and the compressive force. Like we were learning, a lot of pain is from compression. So that stretching is really important. So if it's able to actually stop us from having more severe arthritis, more severe compression on the spine, the ability to keep the space for our organs so that they can, function properly, blood and lymph gets moved. So all of these things are beneficial when we're doing yoga or doing stretching. The other thing that you would like to get if you're going to continue to practice yoga and take it more seriously for health benefits are yoga blocks. Okay. So this is just one form of blocks. There's really cheap ones you can get at Target, but my honest opinion to you is just like your yoga mat shouldn't be cheap, because those cheap $20, $30 ones, you slip a ton. And if you're trying to hold a pose and you're slipping, then you're not getting the therapeutic benefit. Then you're hurting your joints. You're going to be more sore. You're going to have prolonged soreness after your practice. You want to spend $80 to $100 on a yoga mat where like the mat that I have, it's thicker. And if you could touch it, if you come up here, I can barely move my fingers and get them to slide across because it has a gripping action to it, okay? And so it's okay to spend more money, because when you spend that money, it's going to last you years, and then you're going to be much safer in your practice. But then same thing with yoga blocks. Those really cheap foam ones, they're not that great. They're not able to be as steady when you're trying to utilize them in certain poses, and you need them to be so that you don't fall, so that you don't hurt yourself. These ones are better blocks, so you want to spend a little bit more money. And then they have heavier ones that we call cork blocks. And so the cork blocks are really heavy. They're more for typically people that are a little bit more advanced and want the challenge of a little bit more weight, but also the cork block provides the most stability. It's very hard to move it compared to some of the ones that are more in the medium level of blocks. So blocks can be used for all sorts of reasons, but you can put it at any height. So you can use it here at its tallest height. You can drop it down and use it here. You can also drop them down this way to use them all the way at this level. And so today, I feel like we're just going to go over a couple, a good sequence of postures and reasons why we do them and how they can benefit us, so you can start to learn how to do yoga more properly. Okay, so usually I tell my students, put your blocks when you go to practice on either side of the top of your yoga mat so that you can grab them, so you're able to reach for them and grab them, and it's easier for you. All right, so this position is table position, which we have our hands directly under our shoulders and we have our knees hip distance. And a lot of times the problem that I see is students will spread out. A teacher will say, spread out your fingers, but they forget to tell you, do not do an L shape like this, okay? When you see this L shape on the mat, this is straining. This is straining the inside of my wrist. It's going to strain the outside of my elbow. It's going to crush the inside of my shoulder. Instead, with your thumbs, you're supposed to do a J shape. So always make sure when you're weight bearing that you are in a J shape and you are not opening up to an L shape. So here we're in table position, and most of us know cat and cow. And so if you don't, right, cat and cow is a sequence for the spinal cord to open it up, to move that cerebral spinal fluid. And so exhale, and we usually exhale as we drop our head. We round the spine, we let the tailbone release all the way down, and the crown of the head, I can even shake my head to make sure I'm not holding any tension in my neck. As I inhale, I begin to widen my sitting bones, lift my chin. And one of the things a lot of people forget to do when you come to the fullness of this posture is soften the front of your throat. You want to soften the front of your throat. In cat and cow, you don't want to feel rushed. So here I'm moving into cat pose, rounding the spine, dropping my head, exhaling to the fullness and steadiness of my breath. And then as I begin to inhale, I'm going to widen my hips, lift my chin, let my shoulders drop back. And here I'm getting a stretch in the front of my core, softening the front of my throat. And then you continue to do this sequence, which begins to actually open and warm up the spinal cord. One of the other things that I have my students do is we have child's pose, which we bring our big toes and our feet together. And child's pose means that our knees come the full mat distance. A lot of times you'll tell people to come into child's pose and they're leaving their knees too much under the body. True child's pose means that the knees are mat distance because it opens up the SI joint, opens up the hips, right? So for that to happen, this is what we call one of the resting poses in yoga. So if you need a break at any time during a class, you can come down to child's pose and then go back to the class. So you can drop the head and the forehead all the way down. You let the hips relax. There's a couple different variations where you can even tiptoe your fingertips out this way and grip upon the earth and the mat with your hands, giving a little bit of friction and pulling towards the shoulder blades to stretch the lat muscles and the assisting rotator cuff muscles that are close by. A way to stretch the triceps is just slowly bending at the elbows and touching your hands and your fingers to the back of your shoulder blades. So all of these are types of child's pose and our resting posture. Flipping the palms this way. Sometimes you'll even see people bring prayer hands to the back of their head in what we call Anjali Mudra. And palms can come back down, and then you can tiptoe all the way back up, okay? One of the other ways that I tell students to warm up the shoulders, your ball and socket joints, and your hips are actually doing these movements, and I'll move the block just so that you can see me better, where you're doing the four corners of the torso, where you rotate through the left side of your body to the right hip and right shoulder. Then you move to the left shoulder and left hip. And you don't worry about it looking perfect at first, especially in the winter time, which we're in the winter time right now. We're in December. It's a little bit more normal for us to feel more sore when we first start to go to stretch, to feel more like if you have arthritis, more of your arthritis in the cold season. So moving synovial fluid, and you're going to switch sides after you do about 3 to 4 of them. You're moving that synovial fluid through the joints is a very good way to warm them up and help some of that soreness that the cold weather actually starts to agitate. So moving through the four corners, if you notice that you feel, let's say I'm coming up to my left hip and I feel when I first start like it wants to grip somewhere, or the ball and socket joint isn't smooth, then what I tell people is if you feel that in a certain joint, then start to move back and forth, what we call flossing through the joint. And once it feels smooth, you start to go back to your rotation. Right? Once you get experienced, you move through more like it's like a dance, or you can get expressive with the movement. But again, let's say I'm feeling this hip, I can go back and forth for a moment and then go back to a rotation, okay? So this is one of the ways that we can warm up. Now, we want to also go over what I call hero's pose. And in hero's pose, I can grab my blocks, bring them back down towards me. My feet are actually going to go back where my toes are completely elongated, and I'm going to roll out my calf muscles. You take your thumb, roll the calf muscles out laterally, and you come down like this. So hero's pose stretches the top of your foot. If as you get older, you see that your feet and your toes are starting to curl up and hold this action where they're doing like what my top hand is doing like this, you need to be doing hero's pose. You're not getting stretched in the front of your ankle muscles and your tendons. You're not getting stretched through the front of your foot, but also your tibialis anterior, which is in the front shin muscle, which can get really strong, is way too tight. So this pose is going to stretch that out, okay? So if coming all the way down is painful, this is one of the reasons why we have these blocks, right? So you can stick the block in between your feet, you roll your calves out, and then the block is there under me to support me and keep me lifted. So again, more advanced would be I don't need a block. It's not, let me say this. People look at props as weak, all right? We have to get over that stuff. You have to get over that, right? Props are there to help you so that you can safely rehab tissue and joints in the body. And then over time, you can go with less. But it's not the same benefit as me coming down without one to somebody who's never done yoga who is extremely tight. They could hurt themselves. So don't hesitate to use blocks. They're like your best friend when you're doing your practice. So one block is fine. Under my glutes, I feel the stretch. I want to make sure that my feet are straight back because this is fixing some of the issues with my gait. And I can use 2 blocks. If it's so tight that it's too much, then I can use the extra block and just get the stretch without my body weight pressing too far and agitating my foot or my ankle. Over time, I can release it, and then over time, I can completely get rid of it, okay? Okay, so hero's pose is amazing for stretching that part of your body. And then once you come from hero's pose, you're going to want to come back to table and tuck your toes because now you're doing a counter pose. There is a science to yoga, and sequencing is actually very, very important. A teacher that doesn't know how to properly sequence can actually cause their students to be in more pain later or prolonged muscle soreness. There is a science to how we work the body and why we work it that way. So your yoga teachers should be very good at sequencing and understanding that, okay? So tucking the toes is my counter pose. It's an opposite movement for my muscles. And one of the biggest counter poses that we hear of is downward dog, right? So we can roll back into downward dog. And again, I'm checking to make sure my thumbs are in a J shape. And when I'm in downward dog, I can kind of move from my toes to my heels, letting my body warm up, and like my Achilles can open. This stretches the Achilles tendon and my calves along with my hamstrings. I can even pedal one knee and then back and forth at a time. So this starts to warm up my lower body. We have a fascia line from our Achilles and our heel all the way up the calves, up the back of the hamstring, up the back of the erector spinae, all the way up the back of our head. That actually stops all the way at the frontal bone. And so when that fascia line gets tight, we will have tight hamstrings. We can actually, that's when athletes will blow an Achilles tendon because that fascia line's way too tight. So downward dog addresses that fascia line. Ever so softly, we're going to drop the knees, right? And then I can come down. One of the funniest things is when you first start doing yoga, it's really funny. They'll tell you that, oh, downward dog, it's a resting pose. And like if you're new and you go into downward dog, you're like, oh no, this is not a resting pose at all, because it takes a lot of strength in your arms. But over time, as you do yoga, it actually is one and it feels like one. So nobody feels like when they're a beginner, like it's a resting pose in the first, several classes. Their body has to get used to it. So one of the other things that I want to show you is ways that we can utilize the block. So let's just start with, let's say, a low lunge pose, okay? So in a low lunge pose, there's a couple things that I want to see and check. What I want to know is that my knee should never go past my ankle. Now, you'll see this sometimes, like, with more advanced people or in magazines, people doing this, stretching into their back bend, but it's actually really dangerous, and I'm going to explain why. The moment the knee goes past the ankle, I'm putting more pressure on a hinge joint that was never intended to have that kind of pressure, and hinge joints are more susceptible to injury when we take it to an angle that's greater, right, past the ankle than the actual limb itself, right? And then from here too, once the knee goes past here, my femur bone then gets compromised on this side because it actually begins to pop out of my hip socket. This is how I tear a labrum. Nobody wants a torn labrum, right? Doing some extreme back bend, grabbing my hip, getting my actual femur bone out of the socket in a way that's not good for it. Labrum is an actual important thing that holds your femur bone into the hip socket. And sometimes people that are into dance who do it too long or do things a little bit wrong, or yogis who do hip openers and get in the wrong alignment can tear labrum. So we definitely want to avoid that. So from here, I'm in my lunge position. One of the ways, how do I get stability, that I teach my students is, if you're in a standing posture or you're in a low lunge, if you're starting to lose balance, you need to tiptoe your foot out wider. It means that your actual stance, the foundation of your pose, is too narrow. So make it wider. The other thing is, how do I hold and discipline my hips? How do I get proper alignment? I squeeze my inner thighs. So that was me squeezing my inner thighs. You can watch my legs and my hips and my pelvic bowl. I squeeze my inner thighs to gain control over my legs, to gain control over my hips. Now, do I squeeze it 100%? No, because I would turn purple and I wouldn't enjoy, and I couldn't breathe through yoga pose if I'm doing 100%. But I find the balance between muscle effort and then not overdoing it and not doing it at all, right? To squeeze my inner thighs isometrically actually teaches me how to then be able to get more proper alignment with my body, helps me be able to know my strength and feel my body and feel protected. From here, I'm in my lunge position, but again, it's a low lunge because my knee is down towards the earth. So I'm just going to switch sides because I've been holding that side for a while, right? Okay, so here I am in my low lunge. I feel hip distance. So I can tiptoe my foot out wide enough where I feel that. I squeeze my inner thighs enough to get control over my legs and to start to warm up my muscles. And a lot of isometric, which is the type of muscular energy where we're squeezing, hugging skin to muscle to bone, that is utilized a lot in yoga. So we're not just stretching, but we're actually strengthening our ligaments and tendons. We're strengthening our muscles. We're toning them as well. So as I'm squeezing my inner thighs, I'm in my lunge position, and now I want to not see somebody start to C-curve and lift this hip up. This is very common. You're in your lunge position, but when you lift this side of your body and you don't lengthen the side body, my knee starts to turn inward, my hip and my spine are off, my SI joint is lifted on the right side. Instead, I have to slowly sink this hip down. I want even length in my side body in all of my postures and all my standing postures, right? And so from here, I'm squeezing the inner thighs. And then I'm in my lunge position, and typically you'll see arms can come up. Arms can come also open wide. Arms can even be interlaced behind you as you stretch the shoulders. Okay, so there's a couple different variations. And then softly, when I come out of a lunge position, I can lift my back knee and step back to downward dog. And then again, I don't have to stay still. I can stay still in my downward dog, or I can roll it out in different ways. rolling out the postures and getting synovial fluid through my joints. All right, so one of the other things I'm going to show you is, let's say I step all the way up to what we call Tadasana pose. So Tadasana pose is when I'm actually like standing up straight, and this is mountain pose. And so when I'm standing up straight, this is the ability to actually have proper alignment, okay? So we have Tadasana pose. A lot of times you'll see people say root down through your feet, inhale, rise up, exhale, fold. So you'll fold down, but sometimes for some people, again, they're too tight. Reaching and touching the earth is like painful for them. This is where my blocks can be placed to touch down towards the earth. And again, I can do it at all these different levels. I don't have to have it on one specific level. I find out which level is good for my back to start learning yoga and stretching at, right? And so if I need them, they're there. And if I don't, they don't need to be there. I can have my blocks here. I'm folding. Inhale, I can lift halfway up. I can even lift to the tips of my fingers for my halfway lift. And then I can exhale and fold. Again, if I'm not utilizing blocks, I can come with my hands to my upper thighs, but I'm not pressing. Instead, I'm using my core. Belly stays in and up as I stretch through the crown of the head in what we call axial extension. And then we exhale and fold. And you can always shake out your head to release tension in the neck whenever you're doing something like that, right? And just making sure you're not gripping any energy in the head. From here, I'm actually going to come all the way down and just go over a couple more postures that are easier ways to help the body. This way, I would say you would have learned maybe like 10 different postures today, okay? And then we'll close. So in the front end of my mat, I'm going to teach you the gentlest back bend, where you come on your mat and you come all the way down to your belly. So you're unraveling your toes and you're bringing your hands in what we call Sphinx pose. So I tend to move across my mat. Usually my hands can be on the mat fully or just slightly past, right? But in Sphinx pose, your elbows are under your shoulders, and what you'll notice is the eye of your elbow should be closer to the outside of your shoulder than being inward, right? And then from here, again, my hands are spread out, more like in the J shape. And then from here, I dig the tops of my toes into the earth. And one of the things, before I keep going, that I see with people is their legs are too wide. So I want you to notice, if you look back, your ankles should be in line with the center of your hip socket, okay? If your legs are too wide, when you do your back bend, you're going to pinch your SI joint. Again, it's counterproductive to the reason why you're doing the posture. We're trying to open the spine and stretch the abdomen. We don't want to pinch the SI joint. So from here, I have hip distance. I dig my toes down into the earth, just enough, maybe like 20% muscular effort. And then I tone my legs. As I press all my toes down evenly, I'm hugging skin to muscle to bone. I'm gently pressing my hands and my forearms down into the earth and pulling towards my armpits to get my heart to melt and my shoulder blades back. And then I'm keeping my belly button in and up. And if I'm more advanced, one of the alignment cues I give is tone your quads. Notice if you watch my lower abdomen, tone your quads, lift your core up off the earth, which is the pelvic lift. That's more advanced. So if you're more advanced, I invite you to try it. Like my whole pelvic bowl is not on the earth. It's actually like hugging all the way in and up. And this is how I learn how to get strong in my pelvic bowl for other yoga postures. Taking a nice deep breath in, exhale, release, and you can gently make a pillow with your hands and turn your head to one side. So it doesn't matter which side, you can choose either. But your counter pose for this posture is to bend your knees and wipe or wash your feet just to let out any of those things that the low back might feel as it's getting used to back bends, okay? Back bends are really important, and a lot of people will stay away from them because they are kind of scared of them or they're too tight in their core. But back bends help keep a healthy spine. So let me just go over a couple things. Back bends stretch your abdomen, and our stress response in our core, anytime we're stressed, actually locks our abdomen down, actually locks the rectus abdominis down, which it attaches all the way to our low ribs, it attaches all the way through here, and attaches all the way down to our pubic bone. And when that locks down, then we have a posture that we can't totally straighten out. One of the ways we get the parasympathetic, right, nervous system to go back into effect is through back bends. It's like teaching our stress response to let go. Back bends also help prevent the rounding of the spine from the aging process, too tight of pecs. It stretches out and also tones all of the abdominal muscles. There's just like a whole bunch of benefits, okay? So Sphinx pose is like the gentlest form of back bend. And then one of the other postures that we teach in yoga is bridge pose. And inversions are where we bring a lower portion of our body up into the air or above our head and above our heart. And inversions are ways for the parts of our body who get the least oxygenated blood because they're not the closest to the lungs or the heart, that they might be getting oxygenated blood, but they don't get the fresh oxygenated blood. So that would pertain to all the lower portion of our limbs. This would pertain to all the organs and the intestines and the lower portions of our body, our bladder, our, sexual organs. And so when we're doing inversions, we would say downward dog is an inversion. The head is very low. Some of the other inversions, a lot of people will stay away from because they're too hard or they're getting too old possibly to do them. And those would include handstand, those would include headstand, those would include forearm stand, scorpion pose, and a bunch of advanced poses. But bridge pose is our gentlest inversion where anybody can do it. And so you want to make sure you have a block by you so you can practice with the block, but your feet are hip distance, your knees are bent. You don't want the heels all the way up to the butt. Again, this is hard on my hinge joint. That causes too much stress. I want several inches, up to 6 inches away. And then from here, I can start with my hands like this so I can get used to what it means to press down my shoulder blades and press down all the way down into the earth. So in bridge pose, I slowly begin to press through the feet and I lift the hips, okay? Now I can keep my hands like this and press down into my forearms. When you come into bridge and you actually lift up, do not try to look from side to side. It's very dangerous for the neck. So once you're actually lifted in bridge pose, keep your view forward, okay? So from here, my shoulder blades are tucked under and down, and my feet are actually pressing down. So one of the ways I teach new yogis to get used to how we can take the pressure, the weight bearing off of just concentrating to the shoulders and the neck, because we really don't want all the weight bearing down into the neck, is we put a block in between our legs so that you can learn how to squeeze those inner thighs a good amount and get strong. You squeeze the block as you lift up into your bridge pose, and you can press the forearms down and you're breathing. You want to try to hold it for at least 30 seconds. You want to hold it for longer if you can, but you want to be able to give all of the blood that's got like less oxygen to come up to the heart. And then when you bring the hips down, all this fresh oxygenated blood is going to move towards the hips and towards all those tissues that are in the pelvic bowl. So going to tone your glutes. You're toning your whole body, hugging skin to muscle to bone in bridge pose. And then you're softly going to come down one vertebrae at a time. Okay. So the block is helpful in learning to squeeze the inner thighs so that you take pressure off of the weight bearing towards the neck. When we become more advanced, there's a lot of different variations. Our hands can just be straight down and pressing in bridge pose. We can interlace our hands. So I'm going to go over that. So if I'm getting more advanced in bridge pose, I can actually interlace my hands, get my shoulders under there. I can even lift to my toes. When I get really, really far, I can learn how to lift my leg all the way up. But again, I need to be able to know that I'm not going to hurt my neck. I need to be able to know that I am strong enough to squeeze and utilize my whole body so that when I'm bracing myself to do this, it's not just going down into my neck. I'm still squeezing my whole body, lifting my legs, slowly coming down. When I go into a pose, I have a lot of care, right? I'm hugging my belly in and up. I'm squeezing when I come up into the pose. Most injuries happen when people are coming out of a pose because they just let go of everything all at once, and that's not how you should do it. You want to be able to keep the core engaged, slowly utilize coming out of the pose with the same integrity that you went into it. And then when you're out of it and you're totally safe and on the earth, you can rest, okay? So my counter pose for bridge when I'm on my back here is just drawing my knees into my belly and rocking side to side, okay? This just helps me have a counter pose for my spine. Again, notice it's an opposite movement for my spine compared to my inversion, okay? Now, one of the last things that we're going to go over is a way to stretch all of your leg muscles. You get a yoga strap, and this is what I call a little piece of heaven. I'm not going to hold the postures as long as if we were doing a yoga practice. I'm going over postures today just so that you can learn them. But you can always press pause, right, on the tape, do them, and then come back. But one of the first ways that we learn to stretch all the leg muscles is by using the strap. We have one leg that's out straight, so this is going to be my left leg. If this is too hard on your spine, you can gently keep your knee bent, okay? So here I have my left leg straight or my knee bent with my foot to the earth, and then I'm bending my right knee, putting this not into the arch of my foot, but into my toe mounds, which is keeping my pinky toe and other parts of my foot from sickling. And then I'm going full arm's length and I'm just holding. This is a really great series that you can do while you're watching TV on the floor in your living room. And this series should be done on each side so that when you do one leg, you even out your body and you do the other. Normally, I would have us hold each position for 3 to 5 minutes. So that's what you want to do at home. But from here, I'm stretching the hamstring, and people ask, like, why would I hold 3 to 5 minutes? You know, when I stretch, I hold something for 30 seconds. And I kind of laugh because I'm like, you really haven't stretched fully, right? Like, you can't create a structural change to help your body if you aren't holding something long enough. You have many layers to your muscles. We have 700 muscles in our body. That's a lot. So they get utilized all the time. To stretch the hamstring, this is like superficial stretching. When I hit about 3 to 5 minutes, I'm in my third layer of tissue, and that's when I'm getting structural change. That's when I'm actually really getting my body to its happiest point. So I'd be holding this for 3 to 5 minutes. Then I'm going to take both sides of my strap into my right hand, and I'm going to begin to open up, right? I'm opening up my leg. Now, again, when I'm newer, I might come here and stop because my adductor is so tight. But as I become more advanced, I'm going to be able to open my leg up out to the side. As well,
the more flexible I am, the higher my angle will be with my leg. If I'm less flexible, it's going to be lower. If I'm becoming more flexible, my leg's going to go up higher, okay? So I definitely want this hip to feel relaxed to the earth. This is also stretching not just my adductor, but my abdomen and the muscles across the abdomen, as well as understanding that the adductor is 40% stronger than all your other muscles. So again, it's a stress response muscle. So not only does the rectus abdominis lock down when I get stressed, but my inner adductors get locked down too, which is why people end up feeling low back pain or having psoas issues. Most of the time, the adductors have been dealing with stress, and I tell people you should be stretching your adductors every day, honestly. It would prevent a lot of low back issues. It's going to also relax the nervous system. It's going to keep your hips and your spine in proper alignment. And again, we want to wait till we feel them fully open. We're looking more around like 3 to 5 minutes with that. So again, the whole series is done on both sides, and that's the little piece of heaven because you've gotten all of your legs and your hips stretched. So very softly, after I hit the 3 to 5 minutes, I'm going to lift my leg all the way up, switch both sides of my strap into the opposite hand, and then I'm going to go for what everybody can't stand, and mine is definitely tight, my IT band, okay? So your IT band is a series of muscles that's very strong and makes this band that goes all the way to outside your hip, down the side of the thigh, and can affect your knee. So when you start, again, you might stop here when you're beginning. That could be how tight you've been, or you're going to maybe come a little further. Usually when I start, I'm not anywhere near as far as what I'll reach when I'm stretching for 3 to 5 minutes, okay? So why do I want to stretch the IT band? Because a lot of soreness that happens all the way out to the glutes, to the glute max, glute minimus, and medius, all the way to the IT band that can affect the hip, can affect the low spine, can affect my knee, also relate to this very powerful band. And so stretching this is going to keep me healthy and those joints healthy. So eventually I can touch the earth or come close to touching the earth. And as you can tell, again, I've been doing this a long time, and I don't just come all the way down because I lift a lot of weights and I'm a body worker. So sometimes I'm really tight when I start. But by the time I get to my 3 to 5 minutes, I'm pretty low, which is just showing you the need for my body to get this stretch in. So we're just going to imagine again that I'm hitting my 3 to 5 minutes. When I'm done with that, I'm slowly going to begin to lift my leg all the way up. And I'm going to one more time stretch my hamstring muscle. And then you would say, well, why? Because you already did it. Because when you open up all the other muscles, your head of your femur bone needs to find its new place, having actually been opened up properly. So you hold this hamstring stretch only for about 30 seconds as the femur bone kind of learns where it's sitting now that you've stretched out your leg. Gently bend the knee. And then before you go to do the other side, you just allow the leg to touch the earth. And what you'll notice is most people will say, oh my gosh, I feel way more circulation in my hip. I feel really tall on the right side and I feel really short on the left. And that in and of itself should tell you that there's already a benefit happening, okay? So again, you want to do both sides. Both sides are going to be important, okay? So you want to take your time to do the left side along with right after the right, or make sure that if you go left, you're going to do the right. And then you can just slowly relax and completely let go, right? And taking a couple minutes of just like soft meditation. So today's just like getting to understanding why we would use some of the reasons for yoga strap and yoga blocks, as well as going over like some of our postures in yoga, because eventually I'm going to go more and more in depth and have some yoga practices on the podcast, but also for the reason that we can learn why are we doing some of these postures? What are the benefits, right? So remembering that like all of the postures, if you ever look in a yoga book, most of them always start with what are the benefits? Builds willpower. And it really does, right? Because some of the things that you have to breathe through and work out in yourself and in your body when you're doing yoga cross trains you for that ability in life when things are difficult. But also to help your joints, to help your circulation, your blood, your lymph, to help your organs have space and be able to release toxins. And then also, as far as like resetting the nervous system, draining the lymphatic system, right? Like we have a lot of benefits. And I will always go over as we learn different reasons why we're doing certain poses so that you can understand the benefit. Okay. So this is our first like introduction to yoga practice and some of the benefits to our poses and why we're doing them. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And I really appreciate that you continue to listen and just remember to continue to think and speak life into yourself and into others. Have a really blessed day.